Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being available for the first in our series of webinars. The series, of course, we've named Beyond the Basics, Advanced SugarCRM Training. I just want to introduce myself. My name's Jared. I've been working for Evolution Marketing now for about seven years, and working with CRM for about 7 years in that time as well too. So over the years, I have developed an expertise and quite a sort of a deep understanding of the product and how to configure it and set it up for different businesses. And I want to take this opportunity to be able to pass that information on to you so that you can better use SugarCRM. As I mentioned, I represent Evolution Marketing. So we at Evolution Marketing are definitely in the business of helping businesses with improving their internal processes, as well as improving things like their sales systems and sales returns using tools like CRM and similar. We favor SugarCRM. We feel it's a very good platform with a lot of configurability and extensibility. And we definitely want to try and help you to get a better understanding for how it all works. What we're focusing on for today's video is just looking at a few areas of SugarCRM that we think a lot of people would benefit from getting a better understanding from. The main, I suppose, reason that we want to do these videos is that even though there are training videos available for SugarCRM, a lot of them tend to focus more on the broader stroke areas of Sugar and less so on areas that we feel are important and just not touched on very often because they're a little bit more user specific. So I do appreciate that as we go through these sessions, not everything is going to be, I suppose, immediately applicable to you and your business, but we do hope that you will find some interesting topics from this that are, that help you understand SugarCRM better. And we're also very welcome to you sending us emails with any suggestions for content that you would like for us to cover as well. For today's session, though, I'll definitely be taking a look at a couple of key topics, which we'll just look at briefly now. So our first topic that we'll be looking at today is Sugar Identity. So Sugar Identity is a fairly recent addition to SugarCRM. It is come in to replace the existing user management setup. So in the past, users have been able to manage users directly through the SugarCRM administration panel, but the new Sugar Identity system through Sugar Cloud settings just changes that setup a little bit. The focus of the switch to Sugar Identity is just to cover two main areas, really. So first of all, it's to create a combined system for accessing all the different SugarCRM platforms through the one login. So SugarCRM now does have the SugarCRM platform itself, as well as the Sugar Connect, Sugar Mobile, and the Sugar Outlook app as well. And this new Sugar Identity system incorporates a single login for all of those. The other thing that is primarily targeted here is security as well too. So even though the previous setup of SugarCRM wasn't necessarily insecure, as a business tool, we are, and definitely SugarCRM is always looking for ways to improve and I suppose strengthen the security around their product. And this was one of the steps that made a big leap in just improving that further on their existing setup. It does change the way that users are managed in the system, but it is a little bit easier now, I think, and just understanding the process that it follows should also make a lot more sense for you too as to how that is all managed. One thing that is worth noting for this, though, is that it does mean that the old way of doing user management doesn't quite work the same anymore with this change. And because most users of SugarCRM have now been moved across to the Sugar Identity platform, we thought it was a good idea to discuss that so that we could, help provide a little bit of information about how the new system works and how to work with it. So I just want to show that here now. I'm just going to share my screen. And we're just looking at the setup here. So the new Sugar identity system is accessed through the Sugar Cloud Management System. And you can get to that area in two ways. If you're creating a new user, you do it through the user management portal, and then just hitting the action menu next to users and selecting create new user. That'll take you specifically to the cloud settings page for a single user. Otherwise, you can also go into the admin panel and go to password management, and that will take you to the password management section of the Sugar Cloud settings, which will then give you access to the rest of the user configuration settings as well. So I just want to give a brief demonstration of how we would do this with a new user, and also just how to access settings for an existing user. So to do that, I'm just going to go to user management. I'm going to hit the action menu drop down next to users, and I'm just going to select create new user. As you see, that'll navigate me through to the cloud settings tab on a new page. If you're already logged into SugarCRM, this should log you straight in because it is a shared user login now. But you may also get the prompt for the login. If you do, just use your exact same credentials that you use for Sugar CRM. From here, we just fill in the normal pieces of information that we would for a user, and this should all be familiar to you. So just going to set up first and last name, an email address. Email address is very important because this will be used for contacting the user once the account is created. And you can see as well too, it's indicated as one of the necessary fields by the red asterisk that's in here. So I'm just filling in this detail now. Exactly the same as you would for any previous user that you would have set up. Last few things we've got here is that, yes, we want to mark it as an active user, and I just want to make sure I pick the correct type. So regular user or its system administrator, you would pick the one that suits most how the user is going to be using the system. I would expect most users that you'll create will be of the type regular user. Excuse me. So the next options we see on here are then send email to user. Now, this is, I suppose, probably one of where the big changes comes in for this platform change, is that with the Sugar identity system, because it's no longer managed through the Sugar application directly anymore, it does mean that you no longer can manually set and adjust user password settings. So instead, what happens when you're creating a new user is that you've got two ways of addressing that. You can either tick this box here, and when I hit save down the bottom, it will immediately create the user and send that user an email to this email address with instructions on how to access the instance and create a new password for them to log in. If we don't want them to log in straight away, perhaps because we want to spend some time to just configure some like team and role permissions for the user first, we can just leave that tick box unticked. And then instead, once we're finished, we just have the user visit the login page for the SugarCRM instance and just use the forgot password feature so that they can then receive a prompt to reset the password and get into SugarCRM that way. Once they are logged in, they will be able to set their own password and they will be able to update their own password, but admins will no longer be able to update passwords for other users. This actually simplifies the process now because instead, when a user can't log in, all they need to do is just use the forgot password feature and reset their password to get back in. Just going through the rest of the configuration here, the last thing we need to do is just specify the username that they'll use for logging in. And you can set this however you want, whatever your normal setup is for user creation. I would just follow that, whether it's first name space last name. In this example, I'm using last name first initial. From there, we've also just got some general information about the employee itself. So title, department, work phone, and address. If I have information for those, I can fill them in here. Once I'm happy with the configuration of what I've got, I can hit save. Now, I've been brought back to the user screen now for all the users, so I can see all the other users that have been set up in my system already, and I can access them to change settings here. We'll come back into that in a moment. From here though, because I've finished creating my new user, I can either log out of the system, or if I plan to be back and forth in the Sugar Cloud settings for a little while, I can just close the tab as well too, to come back to it easily. I'm just going to refresh my page now. And my new user now shows up in the system. So I can still access them directly in SugarCRM through the users module as well. And the main reason I would do that is just to configure some of the additional settings. So you'll notice when I go in and edit this record, some of the things I can't change are the things like the user profile settings, title, department, address, because they're all configured in the Sugar Cloud identity settings. But there are additional fields of information that I can fill in, such as additional contact fields and description fields. And I can fill those in here and manage them there here as well too. Just understanding that if I need to adjust some of these core settings, I just need to do that back in the Sugar Identity Cloud settings instead. The main reason I would come in and configure some remaining settings for the user in here though is just to make sure that I have set up the things like the locale settings properly for like date and time settings, layout options, default settings for the way records display, that kind of thing. Once I'm happy with all of that, I just hit save and that's my user configured. If I ever need to make changes to an existing user in the future, what I would then do instead is navigate back to the admin panel. And this time I would just hit password management. So you'll see clicking on that does immediately bring me into the cloud settings section of SugarCRM again. And it just brings me to the authentication area, which is the password requirements settings that we're looking at the moment here. So if I want to, I can change these settings here now to set the appropriate rules for the type of passwords that users will create. So this will dictate what sort of password a user has to set when they first log into the system, or if they reset their own password. So you just configure there as you need it. From here though, I can either save those changes and move on, or just move to the users area by just hitting the drop down here and choosing list users, and I get back to my full list. I find it's easier just to search for the user I'm looking for to change. So I'm just going to use the filter bar at the top here, search for my user, and just select him here. So immediately I can come back in. So I can come back in here, make any changes I need, maybe changes to the name of the user that's coming in, or their access level, just depending on what's happening within the business, or any of the other key information that I have on here. I can also come in here and make the user inactive to prevent them from logging in again. And I can also, if I go back to the main screen here, I can also then remove the users from the Sugar Cloud settings as well, and that will remove them from SugarCRM. So just hitting that out will remove them from there. So as we can see there, it's a couple of key, I suppose, sort of takeaways from looking at the Sugar identity information is that one, it has been replacing the existing system, so most people will be on this now. It does have two discrete areas for managing certain user pieces, so just knowing that you go to certain areas to manage certain parts of the user profiles, and that password management has changed. So you do that all through the forgot password feature. You don't have to set passwords manually for users anymore. So the next part of the agenda that we'll be taking a look at today is the quotes configuration. So again, quotes is an area that has been sort of updated in SugarCRM sort of fairly recently, within the last couple of years, and it had a pretty major overhaul in the system. So there was a very big change in both function, design, and features. Lots of improvements made, which makes it a really, really good platform to use now in SugarCRM. Worth noting as well too that there are different versions of SugarCRM available, and because this is a sales-oriented function, it's only available in Pro, Enterprise, and Cell editions. So there is also a serve edition available, but it's not available to users of that particular edition because it is sales focused rather than service focused. Probably the main reason that we want to bring this up and why this is worth talking about is that because different companies use sugar in different ways. So you will find that you have different requirements for the types of products that you sell, the type of information that you want to represent, and just how you present the interface to your users. That is all going to be different from business to business. So understanding how to configure the system to suit the way I want is quite important. So if we just take a quick look at that now, I'm just going to jump back into our system here. And we're just going to go to our administration page again. Now, first thing we'll do is we'll just take a look at the default layout for quotes. So I'm just going to hit create a new quote here. Now, we're not talking about configuring the layout of the quote module itself. That remains configurable via the studio settings, as I'm sure most people are familiar with now, or at least aware of, and you still do that configuration in there. What we're specifically talking about is this piece here. So this area where you add the quoted line items onto the quote and build out the products that make the total quote that you're building. So you can see I've got my subject header bar, the main area for my quoted line items that go in, and my subject footer bar, which has got my subtotals and totals. There's definitely things that we may need to change about that. So I'll just show you quickly how to make that adjustment, just to simplify this layout and make it more specific for your own users. So again, we access that function just through the drop down here. So I'm just going to click on the profile icon and go to admin. And then I'm just going to scroll down until I reach the products and quotes section and hit the quotes configuration option. This brings us into the configuration panel here. And you can see it is broken down into 3 sections. So summary bar header preview, worksheet columns, and grand totals footer. I draw focus to the area I want to edit by clicking on it, and you see that it pulls focus there. And you'll notice how it's got the options for me on the right there, and those are conditional to the area that I'm working on. So I can change what's displayed based on the area that I'm working on. So let's just work top to bottom here and just look at the few options here. So at the moment we can see we've got the discount total, the total tax, the discounted subtotal, shipping, and grand total. Now, first looking at this, important to know that I don't have to use the fields in this order. If I decide, for example, that maybe I want shipping focused a little bit more prominently, I just can click and drag that one up to here. It'll move it in its position, to a different location in that layout. But looking at this, I might also decide that, look, I don't use the discount function in SugarCRM. So I don't need to see discount totals and discount subtotals because they're going to be the same as my regular subtotals and totals. So in that instance, what I do is come across to the right here. I want to get rid of discounted subtotal. So I'll find that one and untick it. And you'll notice it removes it from the layout. And then I'll do the same thing with the discount total as well. Untick it and it removes it from the layout. If I want to make any changes here from here, I can still drag them around and swap them over. Once I'm happy with what I've got in there though, I can move on. But this, as you can see, it's an important step here because we've now simplified the layout. So I'm not presenting information to the user that they don't need to see. So ultimately the layout is simpler and it's less, confronting, especially for new users, and it's quicker and easier to use for experienced users. The next thing I want to do is work on worksheet columns. And again, we mentioned that this is going to be a little bit subjective to the type of business that is using SugarCRM. And maybe there are additional pieces of information that I need to see that aren't displayed here beyond the default ones. For example, maybe I need to see the vendor part number as well as the standard part number. So I can select that one and tick it and it will add it in. And I can reposition it to wherever I want in that layout. Apart from having the default fields, any custom fields that you create for the quoted line items module does also become accessible in the system as well. So I, for example, have created a custom field that's not available in Sugar by default called pack size. So I can also just locate that one in my list, tick it in, and it adds it in. And I can just bring this across through to here. And it might just be because, that's the type of product I'm working with. Like I have a quantity for the number of that product I'm selling, but I also want to know like how many items are in that particular pack, as an example. That's going to be something that's useful to my users. So it's something that I want to add in so that they can see it there. As we can see there as well too, it's if there's any fields that we don't need, we can definitely remove them. I'm quite happy with what I have got there. That's good. So I can now move on to the next step. So just looking at my grand totals footer, this one is pretty default, and it's going to be showing what we need. As you can see, much more limited options of what we can change here, but just following the same theme. In this example, I don't use the discount feature in SugarCRM, so I just don't need to see a discount total. So I'm just going to turn that off from my layout, simplify it again, and just hit save. Now, you will notice that it will take a moment just to save the system. So I'll move back to the quotes module now and hit create quote. As you're navigating around, you might notice that there might be a slight delay as you're doing that. That is because you have made changes to the system, and Sugar is just sort of recaching the information for you. If you do notice a slight delay, it is only temporary for that first time that you've edited the record. From then on in, it'll be just as responsive as you're familiar with. But I've come in here, so just having a look. So on my quote now, I can see my new changes. So I've got my simplified header bar, my updated listing view for the quoted line items, and my change displays for the quote options down the bottom here. So again, not a groundbreaking feature by any means, but definitely an important feature, I think, because one of the key I suppose aspects of successful use of Sugar is configuring it properly for the users. And by removing unnecessary elements from this layout, this is much simpler for my users to look at and much easier to work with. So the last area that I want to take a look at now, if we just bring this up again, if we're having a look at our slides, is the email to case creation feature. This is actually a very powerful feature of SugarCRM, and not one that does get talked about a lot, but something that I definitely wanted to cover a little bit more information on. So this feature has been in the system for quite some time now, and it's probably one of the features I think does get a little bit underutilized sometimes in the system. So it does depend obviously on your use case, Val, of course, and depending on the version of SugarCRM that you are using. Similar to the quotes configuration, this is case management is a service-related feature. So that does mean it's only available in the Pro, Enterprise, and Serve versions of SugarCRM. It's not available in Sell because Sell is sales focused and Serve is service focused. So what it does allow you to do is it gives you a single point of contact for bringing in records into SugarCRM when users reach out to you via email. Now, we find that most businesses do already have this single point of contact email, and it's usually something like an info at or a support at address that you use, or something similar, an address you use for your clients or prospective clients to reach out and contact you. You've probably even used these systems before with other platforms as well too, where you fill in a request page or send an email to an address, and you get an automatic response advising you that your communication has been received and that they'll be following up with you shortly. This is the real power of the case management system, is that it's twofold, and that it's bringing the data into SugarCRM automatically for you, and it's also making that initial contact with that client without your needed intervention. So what this does mean then is that it's better for the business because it's easier to manage a system where every issue that comes in is logged and can be addressed by a user. And it's also easier for your users as well too, because it means that they're not then having to deal with messages that are coming into their own personal inboxes for these kinds of things, which maybe might lead to them being delayed in the response or missed altogether. And it also means as well too that they're not having to handle a lot of that sort of I suppose, day-to-day interaction with that client as well too, because the SugarCRM environment can automatically let the user know that their case has been received, and you can use tools like Sugar BPM for creating workflows to automatically alert that customer as well too as the status on the case changes, keeping that customer up to date, all automatically just while the user is working on their case without needing that to be managed manually by the users. So this feature just works by, like I said, just monitoring an email address for messages that come in and encoding cases for them. So we'll just have a look at the settings for that now in the system. So we're just going to go back to our admin panel again, just from our drop down here, admin. Now, one of the reasons we do find that this is I suppose, a slightly underutilized feature is because that it's not as immediately obvious as to where you configure this. What we want to do is we want to scroll down to the email section in the admin panel and then locate the inbound email option. Once we're on there, we then want to click on the action menu from the menu bar at the top here and just choose new group mail account. From here, we're presented the configuration options, which are split into two parts. So the first part that we need to do is configure the settings for the mailbox that we want to monitor. So I would configure it with a name, and this is just so you can identify which mailbox that you've set up. So whatever you can put in there that just makes it obvious to you what configuration this is important. And then your server address. So obviously this is going to differ depending on the mail provider that you use. But for example, you might be using something like Office 365, in which case you might use something like outlook.office365.com. You just make sure all the necessary configuration settings are good on this side. And then on the other side, we just set up the details for the email address. So first is username, and that usually will just be the email address that we're using. And the password, which is the password we use to log into that mailbox. From there, we've just got to configure the monitored mail folders for inbox and trash. And once we've provided the server details and the user details, we can just hit select. This piece here will query the email provider and then provide you with the options so you can link them. You just need to make sure you just fill in all the required areas. The key piece here is obviously the inbox, which it will be monitoring for emails that come in. Once we've got that piece of the configuration done, we then come down to the email handling options. And then it's where we can see the create case from email feature. So we can turn that on straight away. Now, one of the really, I suppose, powerful features of the email to case creation feature is that not only does it monitor the emails, and it does that by monitoring that inbox that we've set up, it looks for any unread messages in there, and then creates a case record in SugarCRM with that email linked to it. What it also does is it looks at the sender information for the person that sent the email initially, and using that email address, it looks for them in contacts in SugarCRM. And if it finds a matching contact with that email address, because it's one of your existing clients, so you work with them, it will attach that case both to that contact and also to the account or organization that contact is associated with. So straight off the bat, automatically, we've got a new case in the system and it's linked to the person who raised it and the company that they work for. So when the user comes and picks up this case, they've already got full information on what they're dealing with there, because they know who it's from, who it's linked to, and they've got the subject of the case, which is the subject of the email address. And then when they open the case, the body of the message is displayed there for them, as well as having the email link directly that they can review if they need to. We also mentioned that there's then an automatic reply template. So this will automatically send this out when a new case is created in the system. So if you have one pre-built already, you can select it here, or you can just use the create button, which will open up a new window, and you can build a new template. And you can stick certain elements in here, like certain merge fields, so that you can address the person directly and let them know key information like the case number that's been generated, and that'll be very important for them if they do want to follow up with you on an open case, as well as maybe like who that case is assigned to as well, and that can go out immediately when their case is created. One of the other key features around that as well too is, like we said, you can then use those merge fields. So we find it's always a good idea to stick the case number in the subject line. And there's a very strong reason for that. SugarCRM will look for the case number in the subject line. And if it does see it and that person, say, like receives that message and responds to it, rather than it coming back to the same email address and creating a second new case, it'll actually see that case number and associate it with the existing case that's in the system and link that email to that one instead. So that way you're actually getting that additional, I suppose, history of email communication associated directly with the existing case already, rather than just getting new cases that are unnecessarily created in the system. From there, we've just got the settings for how the person receives that template. So we specify the name that comes from who it's from, and so that might just be something like your support team or something similar, however you would address that, and your from address. So this is where you can represent it however you like. So maybe you just want to represent it as like a no reply, at your business name, for example. Just understanding that certain mailbox providers, if they do receive it from an address that doesn't technically exist, it may just default back to whatever address was used for the Sugar mail system, because it is technically going to use these details to send the email notifications out. From there, you would then just configure any like reply information that you've needed. And then you've also just got the number of auto responses. And this just controls the number of times they'll receive an automatic respond message in a 24-hour period. So at the moment, it defaults to 10. So that means that that person could raise 10 cases and get 10 unique emails about a new case that's been created. But if they send additional ones after that, it will delay them out. So you can adjust this setting to based on how your users use the system, but you might find that you want to reduce that a little bit lower, because most people are going to be not raising multiple cases a day. And by using an appropriate template, we can associate any responses that they give to us with the existing case rather than a new one. Once that case does come into the system, we then need to assign it to a user. And there's two ways of doing that. And that's via the distribution method. Very sort of self-evident here, but we'll just talk about them quickly. We've got round robin and least busy. So both of these options are dependent on the team that we assign the email create process to. So what you would do here is that you would create a team in SugarCRM and add all the users who will be managing the support emails to that team. And then depending on what you choose here, if you choose round robin, it'll just go through in a circle through all the users in there. And when a case comes in, it'll just move to the next user in that flow or in that circle and assign the case to them. Otherwise, you can also use the least busy function. And what that will do is it'll look at how many open cases each user in this team has, and it will find the one with the fewest number of cases and assign that new case to them instead. So just depending on how you want to manage those systems is really going to dictate how that happens there. So like we mentioned before as well too, just to recap on that one as well, key features for the case creation is that it is a valuable tool inside the SugarCRM environment. It does allow you to capture any of your support or ticket sort of related cases directly in SugarCRM, allows you to send automatic notifications and gives you greater visibility and greater management and control over those tickets, as opposed to users having to manually manage them independently. And it also simplifies the process for your users so that there's fewer, I suppose, repetitive or automatic tasks that they need to do, because the system can do that for them automatically. And that is going to wrap up the information that we wanted to cover for today's recording. I thank you very much for everyone that did participate in today's recording. Hopefully you were able to get something really useful out of that. I feel like these are good topics to cover, and we've got a number of additional sort of very useful topics coming in the next few weeks that I know that you'll get some benefit from. So I look forward to seeing you in next week's session. As before I mentioned, these sessions are recorded. We will be making the recording for the previous session available when we send out the notification for the next one, and then you'll receive them all as they are available and sent through to access at any time. If you do have any suggestions for, I suppose, topics that you think would be good for us to cover in the future, please do send through some information on that, just to our support@evolutionmarketing.com.au address. And we're definitely happy to take that on board and consider it for additional content that we're covering. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. We'll leave it there, and I will see everyone next week. Thank you.